Welcome aboard Just Jets with your captain, Matt O'Leary. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Hello and welcome to episode number 57 of Just Jets. What's going on? I am Matt O'Leary. We got a lot to get into today. Free agency is upon us. We have the tampering period, so I'm going to get into some free agency predictions. I got your voicemails as well and so much more. But before all of that, let's have a word from our sponsor. NFL draft season is upon us. It's possible that you might have Trevor Lawrence's hair in your pants. Not good. That's why our partners at Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming, have partnered with us to make sure you don't gamble on shaving your balls the same way you like to gamble on football. We're going to make it a little bit easier for you. For all my draft geeks, we have an exclusive 20% offer promo code JETS20 for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. That's promo code JETS20, 20% off and free shipping. Get yourself something nice like the Lawnmower 3.0 to help you, shave and keep everything neat down there. So with that, hopefully you check it out, worth your while. Let's jump into today's episode, and we'll start with some predictions for free agency, because as I mentioned, this is the big week, man. It's a huge week. It's this, the NFL draft, and then it's right on to the 2021 season. As of right now, Over the Cap, which is a great source for salary cap in the NFL, has the Jets listed at $68.4 million in cap space. That number could go up even more. So before I go about free agency, because then the number is going to look off, but I'm going to make a couple of more cuts to improve that number and get it pretty damn close to $80 million. So I am cutting Alex Lewis, Greg Van Roten, Ryan Griffin, and Josh Doxson. Those four cuts bring the Jets up to $79.8 million in cap space, almost $80 million. So the Jets have a ton of money to spend. As it stands right now, they are second behind the Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of cap space. So I expect things to be a little bit different this year. Joe Douglas took a more conservative approach in 2020. He was looking to evaluate what was on the roster, and what we found out is there's a lot of holes and the coaching was not very good. So this year is completely different. I don't think we can look at last year's situation, this year's situation, and go, oh, okay, well, the Jets are just not going to spend in free agency. I don't think that's true. So with that, let's make my predictions. We will talk about all the guys I think the Jets will sign and how much cap space they'll have at the end of it. So starting with, in my eyes, the biggest fish and the biggest need that the Jets have to get is Joe Tooney, 4 years, $60 million, so $15 million a year roughly against the cap. He would immediately improve the interior of the offensive line. This way, Connor McGovern could stay at center, and then you have a major upgrade on the left side, as Tooney's phenomenal, and you put him in between McGovern and Becton. That's a massive improvement. On the right side, I still like Fant, and I would assume the Jets are going to look towards the draft. I would look to draft someone within the first 3 rounds. Maybe it's a center, maybe it's a guard. If you draft a center, okay, great, bump McGovern over to guard. If you draft a guard like Wyatt Davis or Elijah Vera Tucker, okay, that's also fine. And then you plug them in at guard and keep McGovern at center. So the Jets can get creative. I think they need 2 new starters on the interior, and one of those is going to be Joe Tooney, and that's a plug-and-play guy at left guard. Next up, I have Carl Lawson, the edge rusher from the Bengals, and his sack numbers weren't phenomenal last year, but his pressures and hits, he gets after the quarterback. He's still young at 26 years old. I think you get him for maybe around 4 years, $40 million, so $10 million AAV. You might have to go a little bit higher than that. But he's a really intriguing player, and he would fit this scheme perfectly as a 4-3 defensive end. Kind of just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback, which is exactly what you're looking to add. The Jets haven't had someone like that on the edge in a very long time. John Abraham was really the last one to do it consistently. So this is a huge need, not only for the Jets historically, but in this defense specifically, to have an edge presence like that. So I think they sign one and draft one. So Carl Lawson is my sign one. Maybe Romeo Okwara might make sense, but to me, I like Lawson. So give me Carl Lawson at $40 million, $10 million a year. In wide receiver, I don't think they break the bank. There's a couple of franchise tags, so some of the big names like Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin aren't hitting the market, and I don't think they're going to break the bank for Kenny Golladay, as fun as that might be. So I'm going Curtis Samuel, who is just a nice scheme fit. 4 years, $36 million. He had Over 1,000 all-purpose yards last year. $9 million a year seems to make sense. Maybe it gets up to 10, but I don't see it going much higher than that. He's someone who's a very unique kind of a player where he's reliable on third downs. He's pretty much the go-to guy in that Panthers offense on third down. He's a solid receiver and creative. You could use him in jet sweep situations, give him the ball. He had over 200 rushing yards last year. Just a dynamic player with speed, which is perfect for this offense and just something the Jets need more of. They need more speed. So I think that would be an intriguing signing. And then you can maybe look to add another guy in the draft in maybe like round 3, somewhere in that round, maybe round 2 if you trade Sam Darnold. But even at the absolute minimum, having your top 3 of Samuel, Mims, and Jamison Crowder, I think is formidable. Just, add maybe a fourth body because I'm not sold on Vincent Smith being your wide receiver 4 or Braxton Berrios being your wide receiver 4. I think you got to have someone a little bit with higher upside than that. So if you're looking to add someone in the draft or a bargain bin find in free agency, okay, I'm good with that. At running back, I think since the Jets have 2 younger guys in LaMichael Pirine and Ty Johnson, I think they're going to look to bring in a veteran. And to me, Jamaal Williams, I've talked about him a bunch. That's the guy that I want. You can insert another player like Marlon Mack in there. That would be fine. Potentially, I could see them going with someone in like the 3rd round, whether it be a Kenny Gainwell or the kid from UNC. But ultimately, I think they'll look to add a veteran. And with Williams, he played in a LaFleur offense just last year. And he's really solid as a spell back to Aaron Jones. I think in a bigger role, he would thrive. And I would absolutely love it. I think he makes perfect sense for this offense. I think you get him cheap, 3 years, $12 million, so $4 million a year. And I think if he's a lead back, he is going to be solid. So I think that makes a ton of sense for the Jets. Next guy, let's go to the defense a little bit more. Richard Sherman, I have him at 2 years, $19 million, so $9.5 million a year. That might be slightly on the high side, but it might have to take that kind of a premium to get him to come here to play with his old coach. If that number is closer to 5 or 6, yeah, I feel a lot more comfortable, but I decided to go a little bit more on the high side just to be safe. And realistically, you can make it like a 2-year deal that's essentially a 1-year deal. I think he'd be a good mentor to Bryce Hall. Just because I think he has a lot of upside. Maybe you get something more out of some of the other guys like Javelin Guidry or maybe Bless Austin, but to me, Hall's the one that I want to see developed. I think he is good, and I would look for the Jets to add another cornerback in the draft on top of this as well, but usually I'm not someone who likes to sign corners over 30 years old. I get that, but this is a little bit of a unique situation, and if it's essentially a 1-year deal, then okay, I'm okay with it. Next up, I'm bringing back Brian Poole. I know that there's I don't know if controversy is the right word, but some differing of opinions on whether he'll be back or not. I think it makes sense to 2 years, $10 million, so $5 million AAV. Maybe that number gets to 6 or 7 million. But I think he's been a really good slot corner for this Jets team, and especially over the last couple of years, I think he's been one of the better slots in football. And you need a good slot corner in this defense and in the NFL today. So I think it would make a ton of sense to bring him back. If not, maybe they bring in another one of the San Francisco corners as well. Usually we see that when a new coaching staff comes in, they might want to bring in their own guys. So while Brian Poole, I think, is a good player, if he wants to bring in someone he's more familiar with, we can give Robert Saleh the benefit of the doubt there. And lastly, I'm going to sign a backup quarterback, CJ Beathard, 1 year, $2 million. Familiarity in the system, not going to cost you a whole lot, and has some spot starting experience. With all of those signings, the Jets would still have $25.3 million in cap space. Sure, you could fill out your roster the rest of the way from there, bring in a couple more depth guys, and you have to sign your draft class as well. And you're not going to spend all $79.8 million in free agency. That's just not how it works. So if they're sitting with around $25 million in cap space for their draft class and maybe a couple, bargain bin moves, retaining a Harvey Lange or something like that, something to that effect. He might not be back, but you understand what I mean. Might make sense for this team. So those are my free agency predictions. Let me know in the comments or on social media what you think of it, and let me know your predictions for free agency. I'm super excited, super pumped to get into free agency. Hopefully you checked out the preview last night on the live stream. And let's get into those voicemails. First up, let's go to Travis in Ohio. He wants to talk some optimism with the New York Jets.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, buddy.
Travis from Ohio. Hey, buddy. Just wanted to say, and ask, can you remember a time where there was actually more optimism for the Jets since way back? I mean, like Rex Ryan era,
Probably.
maybe Parcells era, back when we were going to AFC championships. Like, it seems like we have grown-ups in the room now.
Yeah.
Even with Johnson and Johnson literally owning the team.
True.
Like, Robert Saleh and his coaching staff all seem awesome. Love Joe Douglas and where he's taking the team. Love our assets. We could stay pat, and I like our options across the board at quarterback. Like, I'm cool with going with Zach Wilson and rolling with him at number 2 after everything I keep hearing about him and reading up on him and watching his play from last year and the year before. Like, I'm good with all that. And then we can, if we go Zach Wilson, we still trade Sam Darnold and get more assets. So, and then you got players that want to come play here just because of the grown-ups in the room.
Agree.
Like, that is ridiculous. And Joe won't overpay for them like previous regimes. So, like, Allen Robinson liking tweets about coming here and freaking Deshaun Watson. They could all be smoke and mirrors. That's fine, but
Maybe.
we never got that before. And that's a fact. I mean, the Jets were not a destination. It was like Cleveland North, unfortunately.
Cleveland
North. And that's
East.
Anyway.
Northeast, I guess.
Love you, buddy. Go Jets, and tell me what you think.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate you checking in, my friend. I get it. I get the optimism. It's different. Like, the Jets went from McCagnon and Gase. Like, that, you can't get more chaotic than that. Like, a general manager who is absolutely atrocious at drafting, handed out a ton of big money on guys that whiffed. We know what happened with Adam Gase. But going from that to Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, two guys who, no matter what your opinion on either one of those two guys are, you have to admit they are very well respected in the NFL, both of those guys. And that matters. It does. It makes a big difference. Do you want to go to play for a guy like Adam Gase, or do you want to go and play for a guy like Robert Saleh? This stuff matters in the NFL. Sure, Gase did have some of his guys, like Demaryius Thomas, right? Wasn't he a Jet for a little bit? And Frank Gore, for example. Like, there are examples of Gase guys, but for the most part, like, more often than not, you're going to find better players and more well-respected players. But not that Frank Gore isn't well-respected or Demaryius Thomas isn't well-respected, but fighting for Robert Saleh. And a lot of people, like, who was it? The old Ravens wide receiver came out on Twitter and said the Jets are going to be turned around from Joe Douglas is going to turn around the Jets. Torrey Smith. A lot of guys buy into that stuff, and I'm starting to bite too. So I completely understand the optimism. I really do. Next up is, I believe, Matt from Staten Island. It's either Matt or Max, so apologies if I got it wrong, but I'm going Matt from Staten Island. That's what it says on the transcription here on the voicemail anyway. He wants to talk running back.
Hey, Matt. It's Matt from Staten Island, New York. I just had a question really quick. So,
Sure.
About the running back situation. Do you think that the New York Jets should target a cheap running back? Wayne Gallman from the New York Giants. I think he's a good option as a cheap route to go in New York. I just wanted to know. I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't believe the Giants did re-sign him. I haven't seen anything, but I doubt they did yet. I've been watching your show since March of last year, and just
Thank
keep
you.
it up because you entertain me, and I love watching the show. So keep it up, and good work.
Absolutely. That's big stuff. Thank you very much for the kind words there. I do expect the Jets to go a little bit on the cheaper side just because the San Francisco style of offense that's going to be run, they've gotten so much out of these bargain bin type of running backs. Like, they could probably find a way to get Ty Johnson some big numbers. Like, if he's the feature back, would it stun me if he got, 4.5 yards a carry, 800, 900 plus yards? No, it really wouldn't. But I'm okay with doing that. I mentioned him, but Jamaal Williams is someone that I like. Taking a flyer on Marlon Mack, who, he missed last year, but was a productive player before that. I think these things make sense, totally. And I don't think they're going to spend a ton of money or a premium asset on the position. I think they're going to go a different direction here. And I think it makes sense based on the rest of the needs on the roster. So that's my take on it, Matt. Let me know what you think. James in New Jersey is next. He wants to talk about quarterbacks for 2021.
Matty,
Yo.
This is your boy James from Jersey. What's going on, man? Here's the thing, man. I'm having a question about well, not a question, reaction. I apologize. Just about what's happening overall with the free agency, with the question of whether we keep Sam Darnold, whether we, get Deshaun Watson, whether we draft Zach Wilson, right? I told you this before. I'm a huge fan of Sam Darnold, but I'm not opposed to the fact that we get a quarterback in the draft. It's going to happen either way. But one thing that I guess we should all keep in perspective here, and we'll see what happens. But I don't think we're obviously one position away from making the playoffs or making a championship. I know Rob Saleh said that we will win championships in the future, but I don't know. I guess got to see how this roster looks first with free agency and the draft. But we're definitely not, a quarterback away from contending in playoffs unless the quarterback is actually that talented. So I'm all for the hype train. I'm just, I'm getting a little paranoid and skeptic. And obviously, being a Jets fan, when you get skeptic and optimism's high, something always gets shot down. So I'm a little afraid. But I don't know. Talk to me, man. Let me know if I'm crazy, if I have the right to feel this way. But again, I know, I'm being a little pessimistic now in terms of the season for 2021. We're not going to be a player away from making it to the big dance. But let me know how you feel about it. That's just how I feel. This is my paranoia here. But thank you so much for listening. And as always, go Jets. Thank you, Matt.
Much appreciated, James. Thank you for calling. I don't know if I'm going to disagree necessarily. Like, this team, to me, I don't think they're a playoff team in 2021 unless something crazy happens. But I think that they could take a legitimate step and be competitive. Like, for instance, we talk about this a lot, but the 2019 Jets were a fraudulent 7-9 team. They were. You look at that team. They started out so slow. They won a bunch of games late in the year, one against awful teams, and then two on top of that, on the back of their defense the last few weeks. That was probably really closer to like a 4-12 team. But the Jets, I think there's a chance they could be a competitive 7-9 this year and then really look to compete in 2022. I don't think this is a team where you look at and say, oh my God, they're not going to even sniff the playoffs for another 3 years. NFL doesn't work that way anymore, man. It doesn't. These turnarounds can happen quickly. For example, in 2019, the Miami Dolphins were going full tank mode, right? They were going to be the worst team in football. They're going to get the number 1 all pick, tank for Tua, and they ended up getting Tua no matter what anyway. But they ended up going 5-11, and they were on the verge of making the playoffs in 2020. That's how quickly these turnarounds can go. If you are well coached and get solid play at quarterback, that makes all the difference in the world. Quarterback is by far the most important position in the sport. So while, yes, they are not just one player away, having a really, really good quarterback makes life so much easier for you. It really does. So hopefully that answers your question and maybe puts your nerves at ease. Let's go to Ben up next, and he has a little bit of a mock trade / offseason.
What's up, Matt? It's Ben from Jersey. So I'm going to do a sort of mock trade scenario plus free agency, whatever you want to call it. Keep in mind, one of these moves isn't realistic. I'm just here to say the moves that we can make and the amount of cap space we'll still have after all these moves. So the first move, I'm going to trade for Deshaun Watson. I'm saying this a lot, but I'm giving up pick 2, or a 2022 pick from Seattle, our first in 2023, and John Franklin Myers. We know why each side would want to do this. I'm not going to explain it. So another big trade. Allen Robinson, we know, is unhappy with the franchise tag, and apparently he might request a trade soon.
Ooh.
And I don't know if this is true, but judging from all the tweets that Allen Robinson has been liking, apparently his spot that he wants to go to is the Jets. So I doubt this is going to happen, but I'm just putting something out there. I'm trading Sam Darnold, a 2022 conditional third-round pick that can turn into a second if Robinson re-signs with us for, obviously, and we get Allen Robinson in return. We get our number 1 receiver. Bears get Sam Darnold. They can take a shot and try to fix him. You get it. And then cuts. We already cut Henry Anderson. Then I cut Alex Lewis, saving $5.3 million. Cutting Josh Jackson, saving $1 million.
Yep.
Cutting Greg Van Roten, saving $3.5 million. Cutting Ryan Griffin, saving $1.8 million. And cutting Sam Ficken, which saves $850,000. And Sam Darnold getting traded saves $4.5 million. So this is about maybe I did some spot racks, so this rounds up to about like 85, 86 million cap. So I'm gonna re-sign Terrell Basham and Harvey Lange for 2 years, $4 million each. Re-signing Jalvin Guidry for 2 years, $2 million. Signing Joe Tooney for 4 years, $64 million. I'm signing Richard Sherman for 2 years, $10 million. I'm signing Jamaal Williams for 2 years, $8 million. I'm signing Quan Alexander, who's gonna get cut by the Saints soon, for 2 years, $7 million. I'm signing Kyle Juszczyk for 3 years, $9 million, and I'm signing CJ Beathard for 2 years at $3.5 million. You know how much money this still leaves us with? $25 million. More than enough to sign our draft class and still have leftover money.
Yep.
Now, obviously, I don't think the Allen Robinson trade is realistic. It may happen if Robinson requests a trade and he wants to go to us. Joe Douglas could make a call for that, but I don't think that'll happen. I think we sign Curtis Samuel or someone like that in free agency, maybe Kenny Golladay. I know you don't like Will Fuller, but I like Will Fuller a little bit. Let me know what you think, and as always, go Jets.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, and a lot of similar guys on our list, and a lot of similar cuts. Didn't hear this voicemail before I made my list, which is funny. But I think it makes sense, the direction that you're going here. I'm with you. I don't know how realistic an Allen Robinson trade is. I don't think they're going to bring back Mitch Trubisky, so maybe he'd be excited about playing with a rookie quarterback or if they move for Russell Wilson, I don't know if that's really all that likely. And it seems like, as I'm recording this today on Sunday for a Monday episode, or a Monday release rather, Kyle Juszczyk looks like he's going back to San Francisco. And I don't know if there's another fullback on the market, really, that would make as much sense for the Jets. And I don't know if I love getting in a bidding war for a fullback with the amount of needs on this Jets team. So we'll see there. But I like a lot of the guys that you decided to bring on. I think the contracts make sense. I think I went a little bit more for Sherman. Yeah, a little bit more. But that's understandable. It is. And I think you make a lot of good points. So thank you, Ben. Let's go to Charlie in Wisconsin. He wants to talk about Greg Van Roten.
Hey, Matt. It's Charlie from Wisconsin. Called in last week, and it was fun. You liked my idea, so I thought I'd do it again.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd call this week about Greg Van Roten. I don't know why Jets fans want to cut this guy. He's only making like $3 million. So that's like backup money to me. So I don't see why you'd get rid of him at that point just for the cap number. And he wasn't even the problem with the O-line. It was like Alex Lewis or Connor McGovern mostly. So why do Jets fans want to get rid of this guy? Is there something that I'm missing?
I personally would rather spend the $3 or almost $4 million that you would free up from Greg Van Roten somewhere else. You can maybe sell me on him coming back as a backup. I think the Jets should look to improve starting, but if you told me that Van Roten's back and he's going to compete with a rookie at that spot, I would rather have like Cam Clark and maybe re-sign Pat Elflein, cheaper money, to be your depth at that position. They're going to be 31 years old. I just think that they could get probably close to equal value for a little bit less. I don't think he was awful. I just thought he was up and down last year. And a little inconsistent. So while he's not the biggest issue, I do think McGovern would improve from a little bit of an upgrade on both sides at guard. And Alex Lewis, I think both really Lewis and Van Roten had up and down. Like they both weren't playing well at the same time. It was either one of the two was playing well and the other one wasn't. So I don't think he's a starter in this league anymore. If he sticks as a backup, okay, I guess. But I think I would rather go a different direction, just me personally. But I kind of understand where you're coming from. Next up, we got Vinny in Peekskill wants to talk about the pro-Darnold argument and why he does not agree.
Hey, Matt, it's Vinny from Peekskill. And obviously, remember last week I talked about like some parts about why the Jets should move on from Sam Darnold. Mostly I want to talk about some of the ridiculous arguments that obviously we've gotten from the pro-Darnold camp. Because I think a lot of their arguments are very ridiculous. I think far too many of them are sentimental and just really wanting him to pan out. But obviously the biggest argument of theirs is, well, what if we draft a quarterback and he doesn't pan out? Which I think is just foolish. Because one, we can say, well, what if you keep Sam and he doesn't pan out? And secondly, you got 3 to 4 years to figure that out. That's plenty of time to build up the roster. So if a guy like Wilson or Fields turns out not to be the guy, you can pivot and be like the Rams this year, trade for an established veteran like a Matt Stafford, or the Colts, trade for a guy with a lot of high upside like a Carson Wentz, or heck, like the Jets back in 2009, trade up to draft another quarterback. Like, whiffing on the quarterback isn't going to handicap you as long as you can build up the rest of the roster. Which I think is just ridiculous that they think that somehow that will happen. That's all. And go Jets.
I think here's what I'll say, because I agree pretty much with everything you said. Everything you could say for the pro-Darnold argument, you could also spin and use it for the opposite, the side of it. Or well, what if you draft somebody and he isn't good? Well, I mean, we're going into year 4 of Sam Darnold, and I agree there has been flashes. And in his first 2 years, I was excited about Sam Darnold. It's just the massive regression we saw in year 3 is really scary, and you're going to have to pay this guy significant money soon. And you're sitting there at pick number 2 in a quarterback-rich draft where your quarterback is coming off a historically poor season with a 32nd ranked offense in back-to-back years. Like, there's not an easier setup to make that transition than this year right now. And you could still trade that quarterback who has underperformed in his career so far and still get some pretty good value back at this point. But if you keep him for another year and he's not good again, you're probably not picking number 2 overall. They're going to be too well coached, and the defense is going to be too improved that even if Sam Darnold isn't the guy, like let's say he throws, I don't know, if he finally plays 16 games, which is also something he hasn't done yet in 3 years, but he throws for 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, you're probably going to say, okay, I think it's time to move it along here. And at that point, what are you flipping him for? Because you're going to have to pay that, whoever you trade him to, that team's going to have to pay him. And like the value's going down then, and you're going to have to move up to get a quarterback potentially. It's just it would be a whole mess, man. Just don't make life so difficult on yourself. Emotionally is the toughest part. Like, the emotion invested in Sam Darnold is really the toughest thing to move past. But if you take that out, I think the decision kind of makes the most sense right in front of you. So thank you, Vinny, for checking in with us. Let's go to John in Boston. Speaking of the devil, wants to trade out of 2. So the complete opposite of what Vinny was saying to do.
Hey, Matt. John from Boston again. How you doing? So I've called in before. I'm heavy on the Sam Darnold bandwagon. I think it's smart and best decision to trade the number 2 pick and trade back in the draft and select an offensive weapon, within the top 8, whether that's Jamar Chase or Pitts or any of the other wide receivers. I just think it's the smartest decision moving forward. You collect a lot of draft capital moving down, and you build the team through the draft. Now, that being the base case scenario, assuming all of that, I want to shift the focus to the backup quarterback, or bringing in an experienced quarterback, specifically Alex Smith, who's just been released from the Washington football team, bringing him in to bring in some top competition for Sam Darnold, and maybe not have it be a full-out open competition at QB, but really light a fire underneath Sam's behind that he's got to get his act together. I feel like bringing in Alex Smith is going to be not only a great competitive duel for the starting job, but it's also going to give Sam a great leadership mentor because, Alex Smith has been he's top overall pick in the draft, and he's kind of faced a lot of adversity in the league. So I think him coming in, pushing Sam, it'd be a great backup option. And if Sam doesn't perform, you got a reliable number 2 who's got something to prove. Alex Smith, I'm sure he's got something to prove in this league after coming back from that bad leg injury. And so if Sam doesn't perform with all of the draft assets and assets we get in free agency through this season, you pull Sam, you put Alex Smith in, and you target a quarterback in next year's draft. I think bringing in Alex Smith would really benefit Sam in a lot of ways, and I just want to hear your take on if the Jets seem to keep Sam, who would be a good number 2 or backup quarterback to bring in to push Sam or help Sam develop more. Like I just have been describing, I think Alex Smith would be that guy. So let me know your thoughts on that, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Alex Smith would not be very high up on my list, and I appreciate Alex Smith for making the effort to come back after that awful injury, and he was well deserving of the comeback player of the year. There's no doubt about it. But his numbers this year, so in 6 starts, 8 games, 66.7 completion percentage, which is always something. He always has a high completion percentage. 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 6.3 yards per attempt, 197.8 yards per game, a 78.5 rating, and a 34.8 QBR. He's going to be 37 in May. You want to bring him in as a quarterback coach? Fine. I would not feel comfortable if Alex Smith has to play. He is one hit from his career being completely over. And I appreciate the story. And he had some good years in Kansas City, and he was effective as a starter in terms of what their record was. But the offensive output, I don't think is there anymore. He's not going to be the same player that he was pre-injury, and I don't think he's going to. I don't think he's going to be the one to push Sam Darnold. And I don't like that because if you have the 2 quarterbacks, you really have none. You want someone who really can make a push? Marcus Mariota, Andy Dalton, someone like that. I wouldn't want to spend that money that it would take to bring in one of those guys to put behind Sam Darnold. I think if you are sticking with Sam Darnold, you just go all in on him and not have a backup plan where, if Sam stinks, then let's put Andy Dalton back there. Because, how'd that work with Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow? Disastrous. I don't think it would be a wise decision to spend that kind of money on bringing in someone who is that old and who is that close to his career being over in one play. I can't in my head justify trading out of 2. But if you do, then I am trying to go all in on Sam. It's Sam or bust. So I'm not looking to bring in an Alex Smith to put behind Sam as an emergency because I don't think that's a good emergency plan. Tom in New Jersey is up next. He wants to talk about Brian Poole.
What's up, Matt? It's Tommy from New Jersey. And I don't really got questions. It's more like an opinion. I just saw some reports like the Jets probably not bringing back Brian Poole. And I was just thinking, last year, when we didn't bring back Robbie, and then Joe Douglas was asked about it, he's like, I think I made a mistake not bringing back Robbie. I think it's the same thing, but just on the defense, I feel like Brian Poole is basically the Robbie Anderson of the defense, really undervalued. He's he gives you good value for what you pay him, and you don't got to pay him too much. He'll produce for you. He's a good player. I don't know. I like him a lot. I
Me
think
too.
He's really good, but it looks like we're not bringing him back next season. I just want to know what you think about it. Would it be a good thing to bring him back would be a good thing to not bring him back, let me know. Keep doing what you're doing. I love the podcast.
Thank you.
Go Jets.
I want to bring him back. Let me preface it by saying that. And in my mock offseason, my predictions, I guess, I did think the Jets would bring him back. If they don't bring in a comparable replacement, then I would agree with the decision and say that it would be a mistake. But if it's just an example of Robert Saleh wanting to bring in one of his guys, someone that he's worked with to play slot and move on from Brian Poole, then you could sell me on that. Like, I'm not saying I would be a little disappointed like initially, but then I would say, okay, who are they going to replace him with? And if it's a worthy replacement, then I could probably get over it. But if it's someone who is not on the same level as Brian Poole, like what Brashad Perriman was to Robbie Anderson, then yeah, I'd probably be a little bit upset, and then I'd be right there with you. But I think I'm going to give Joe Douglas the benefit of the doubt here until we see. If that's the case, if Javelin Guidry is the starting slot corner for the Jets next year, then I'm probably going to be pretty critical of Joe Douglas in that aspect. So hopefully that answers your question, Tommy. Jeff in Cali is up next. He has a take on a Sam Darnold trade scenario.
Hey, Matt. This is Jeff from Cali.
What up?
And I know what I want for Sam Darnold.
Let's hear it.
So this is what I think is pretty realistic and will set the Jets up not now but for the future. I want the Washington football team 2022 first-round pick.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
The draft trade chart or whatever it's called, the point chart, a future first is worth a current second, right? So that's Darnold's approximate value, and here's why I want the first-round pick from the Washington football team.
Okay.
First of all, Dak Prescott just re-signed with the Dallas Cowboys. What does that mean? Well, that means that the Washington football team practically, especially with Sam Darnold, no offense to the guy, love him, is not going to win the division against Dak Prescott and the Cowboys.
Probably not.
And
Agree.
personally, I believe that the Washington football team overachieved last season with a 7-9 record, and I think it's very plausible that they come back down to earth a little bit. Maybe they, it's a 17-week season next season, but I could see, a 7-10 or a 6-11 sort of season from the Washington football team, which will put them at around 10 to 12 is kind of, obviously it's a whole season away, but kind of a rough estimate of where I see the Washington football team ending up. Now, we would have 3 first-round picks next year. We would have a young starting quarterback in Zach Wilson, or, whoever the hell it ends up being, who knows. But I think that is the best opportunity for the Jets to really build for the future. You're going to get the maximum draft capital for Sam Darnold for trading for a future first-round pick. Let me know what you think. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of see that's interesting. That's a little bit outside the box. But it's an interesting bet saying that they're not going to win the division again because they have pick 19 this year. So you're saying that, okay, even if they finish with a similar record at 7-9, then you're assuming that, the Cowboys probably win the division with a better record than 7-9. I agree. I think with Dak healthy, they are the absolute front runners for that division. So then maybe you're picking at pick 13. It'd be interesting. I don't know if they would go for it, but if Joe Douglas was able to pull that off, that'd be exciting because then, can we just dream for a second? I'm fully admitting that this isn't necessarily a likely scenario, but let's just play the dream for a second. The Jets do exactly what Jeff is saying. So you trade Darnold, let's say they go 7-9 and you get pick 13. Then the Seahawks trade Russell Wilson. Again, I think that would be a massive mistake, but let's just say they trade Russell Wilson. They go 5-11, and you have pick 6. And then wherever you land there, imagine if the Jets have 3 top 20 picks next year. My God, let's dream for a second. Love it, Jeff. It's outside the box. I don't know how likely it is, but it's an intriguing alternative to, just trading for a second this year. Let's go to Spencer in Illinois up next. He wants to talk about a quarterback decision timeline.
Hey, Matt. Spencer from Illinois. I'm just calling in to ask, what do you think Joe Douglas's decision timeline is for the quarterback position? So, I mean, we've got free agency coming in the next week or so, and we've already seen Tom Brady sign an extension. So do you think that this puts the impetus on Joe to make a decision closer to the start of free agency rather than the draft? And do you think that if Joe Douglas waits, that will make Sam Darnold's trade value go down? Thanks for taking my question, and go Jets.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting point to bring up. I think it's really all dependent on how the other quarterback dominoes fall. I think in a perfect world, you know what your plan is at quarterback going into free agency, but as it stands right now, recording Sunday, dropping the episode Monday, don't know what the Jets' plan is. And free agency, the tampering period starting, and it technically kicks off free agency on Wednesday. So, like, I don't know, dude. I would prefer if they move this process along and we start getting some answers here, but I don't think we're going to see that. And in terms of what his value would be, I think it's really dependent on how the other quarterbacks' dominoes fall. They could still get good value right before the draft or on draft day if Washington, San Francisco, Chicago don't have answers at the quarterback position at that point. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. I know it's not a great answer, but that's kind of how I'm feeling on it right now. Mark in DC is our final caller of the episode. He wants to talk about when should the Jets draft a running back.
Yes, this is Mark from Washington, D.C. I understand why the New York Jets should not draft a running back in the first round or early in the second round. But if Kenny Gainwell is available late in the second round or early in the third round, do you think Joe Douglas should pull the trigger on him?
I would say the earliest I would take a running back is the third round for the Jets this year. Again, it's not. So my stance isn't never take a running back in the first round or in the second round or anything like that. It's really dependent on what your roster needs are. Like, for example, last year the Chiefs took a running back in the first round with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Great scheme fit. They have a complete roster. It's trying to put themselves over the top. Fine. I'm good with that. That made sense for them. But if they, being the Jets, are taking one in the first or second round with the amount of needs on the team, that would be tough for me because you can still get good value on running backs in round 3, 4, 5, but you're not going to get that same value at edge or at wide receiver or corner, for example. Maybe on the interior offensive line you can. We find guys in the seemingly going in the third round who become day one starters just about every year. But I don't know. I just think it'd be wise to invest more in premium positions early so you have a better shot of it panning out and then take a running back in like round 3. Because even if your room is, let's say, Gainwell, Johnson, and Pirine, I could live in that world. I really could. So that's my answer. I wouldn't go running back in the second round, but if they take one at the top of the third, I could live with that. So big week this week, free agency. So stick around on the channel. If you are listening to this in podcast form, head on over to youtube.com/MattO'LearyNY and make sure to subscribe so that you can get your free agency news and reaction as it happens. I'll have you covered this week. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll talk to you next time.